Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this another Grumpy Ewok video. And I know it's been a while. It's definitely been more than a minute. Yes, I'm well aware. As you probably already realised, one of the reasons why we do these videos is because I like to rant about things in this world that confuse me, and there are a lot of them. There's loads of things in this world that confuse me. Um, and one of those things is technology, which is kind of ironic considering that I'm on YouTube. But look, the only reason I'm on YouTube is because I have younger people than I that understand technology that hold my hand and guide me through it. But unfortunately, we had microphone issues, and those microphone issues have gone on for a while. The original microphones fell over and decided they weren't going to work anymore. So then we had to invest in a new microphone, and it seems standard settings just don't work for me. Who to funk it? Yeah. So no joke. The recording of this particular episode, this is now recording number 7, because all of the previous recordings, the audio was corrupted, glitching and horrible, and you would not have enjoyed it. So here we are, back once again. So hopefully you haven't forgotten about us. Hopefully you haven't been crying yourselves to sleep every night because you really miss us. And if you have, I'm sorry. Now, as you've probably guessed by the title of this video, this particular video is all about animals, and in particular animal weapons. And who doesn't like talking about animals? I mean, let's face it, animals are man's best friend. Well, in most cases, right? I mean, let's face it, most of us love animals: dogs, cats, horses, Donkey from Shrek. We love them even though we say we don't. And they love us too. They love being around us. They even help us. We've had guide dogs for years. We now have service dogs, and it doesn't end there. Horses have helped with transportation for thousands of years, as have ponies and donkeys. The list of human and animal cooperation is pretty long. But what if I was to tell you that animals have served as weapons for thousands of years too? And some of those weapons, well, frankly, they're just weird. Now, we're going to tell you all of that after a quick word from our sponsor. I say sponsors, but we're new, so we don't actually have one. Instead, I'm going to tell you about our favourite charity, Operation Florence, formed by a lovely bunch of ex and currently serving healthcare and emergency service personnel who see the decline in funding and gaps in capability as a real problem. They're working to build a volunteer-based emergency medical rescue and healthcare service that they hope will one day have locations across the country. But to do this, they need funding. I know, it's kind of ironic, but there it is. But they're awesome, so we really want to help them. So if you want to know more about them, details of how you can donate or not, or how to find out more about these amazing people, all the details you need will be pinned in the video description below. Right, now we've done the sponsory bit, let's get into it, shall we? Police and military are well known for their use of animals. We all know about police and military attack and enforcement dogs, otherwise known as the furry land shark. And of course, sniffer dogs are well documented for their legendary abilities, not only in military and law enforcement settings, but in search and rescue operations, with many being honoured for their service and sadly, in some cases, their sacrifice. Of course, we all know of the legendary war horses, don't we? For thousands of years, horses have formed half of the personnel of the cavalry, seen in many a movie, and of course, the film turned stage play War Horse. Yet, in modern times and modern military, horses have given way to light tanks for anything other than ceremonial use. Police, though, well, they still have their version of cavalry, mounted police, still using horses. And those horns is? The fuck is a hornsis? I heard you sniggering. Police, though, well, they still have their version of cavalry, mounted police, still using horses. And those horses maintain a tradition that has lasted for hundreds of years, like their canine colleagues. They are sworn officers and are treated as such, as some have found out the hard way after hurting or attempting to hurt a police dog or horse. sometimes with video recorded results that I find highly amusing. For instance, a few years ago, during a riot in London, this chap, he just went running straight up to this police horse. And he punched that horse as hard as he could, straight on the nose. The look on the horse's face was brilliant. He's literally looking at this guy like, seriously, is that all you've got? And then started sniggering. That horse was actually laughing as this guy got piled on by 8 police officers. He was arrested, charged, and convicted with assaulting a police officer. It was a horse. You see, when I started looking into this after my curiosity got tickled by something my son said about flying cats, I figured the strangest thing that I would find would be the extensive list of military animal mascots. And there are a lot of them with some seriously regal backgrounds, from bears to goats to ponies. The ones I find the most interesting of the mascots are the accidental ones that turn out to be badass heroes. And to be honest, the US Marines seem to have cornered the market on that one, though. Firstly, they had Sergeant Seawash, a beer drinking duck that was won in a game of poker by Sergeant Fagan in 1943. Sergeant Seawash went on to take part in beach landings and battles, even attacking animals that were with the Japanese troops on the opposing side. Secondly, another one I found, they had Sergeant Reckless, a racehorse acquired by the US Marines in Korea that carried ammunition for a recoilless rifle up a hill that they were defending at such a pace that it frankly turned the tide for the Marines, allowing them to succeed in their mission. The same horse was then literally smuggled back into the United States following their deployment. Now, I'm really not doing these stories any justice, but luckily someone does. Look them up with the Fat Electricians channel, definitely worth a watch. The reason that I'm not really doing them justice here is because, frankly, what I went on to discover is just, well, it's just nuts. We're talking a level of crazy that no one would ever believe it, but it's true. It was one of these that led me down this path in the first place. Yeah, something my son said about flying cats, and then I Googled it and I thought I'd be able to disprove things. And well, here we are with some of the craziest shit I've ever come across. It really is. And that, ladies and gents, is animals used as weapons. I'm not talking fairyland sharks or fairy horses. I'm talking actual weapons. Now, the first recorded instance of animals as weapons dates back to the times of the Romans, Carthaginians, and Indians, who were well known for using elephants, the first of the tanks, and that's literally how they used them, as literal living tanks. Now, that's fairly understandable. But the method that the Romans devised to defeat these living tanks, the first ever recorded anti tank weapon, as it were, well, it wasn't mice like in the cartoons. No. They covered pigs in pitch oil, set them on fire, and sent them running at the elephants, as you do. I mean, seems obvious if you don't think about it. I mean, some might say it's even multitasking. I mean, it's essentially a hog roast as a weapon, right? Moving through history, there isn't really anything of note until we get to World War II, where frankly, I don't know if I'm impressed with the ingenuity of what we find here, or a little bit scared, if I'm honest. You see, the Allies, they really went to some lengths to enable animals to join the war effort. We'll start with the Russians because, well, there's only really one documented instance here, and as best as I can tell, these were actually deployed and used in combat. Anti-tank dogs. You did hear me correctly. Anti-tank dogs. These were dogs that were starved and trained to search for food under tanks with explosive devices strapped to them. Originating in 1930, the Red Army began training dogs for this purpose, although they didn't actually have any dog trainers, so they resorted to using circus trainers alongside police dog handlers for the purpose. Initially, they favoured German Shepherds for their ease in training and abilities, but later did use some different breeds, with the Specialist Anti-Tank Dog Units going into service in 1935. They were deployed into war in 1941 through to 1943 with great success. However, originally they were trained to leave a magnetic timer detonating device under the target tank, which seems fair, caring almost, looking out for the canine soldiers. But later they changed the devices to become pressure activated. Now that was a response to the fact that the Germans modified the underbelly of their tanks to avoid magnets. meaning that the dogs would go under the tank, activating a pressure switch on the dog's back, meaning that the dog was killed in the process, which kind of seems like they took a leaf out of the Japanese playbook for their canine colleagues. Pretty counterintuitive, if you ask me. Except that there were actually a couple of recorded exceptions to that rule. One that even made it into the movies. There were, in fact, a few of the Russian anti-tank dog handlers that fought outside of the box, switched the detonators to remote ones, and trained their dogs to take off the jacket holding the bomb once under the tank and retreat. They would then detonate the bomb remotely once the dog was safe, but these were the exceptions, not the norm. Now, that pretty much concludes the ones that actually made it into active service and combat, but trust me when I say it just gets weirder from here, especially when we consider that all of these were live tested. Now, since I'm British and I have to decide where to start with these, we'll start with the British and the most recent. Project Blue Peacock. Now, this was the outlandish design and manufacture of chicken-powered nuclear landmines. Yeah, this was a Cold War project, the idea being that tactical nuclear landmines, weighing in at just under 7.5 tons, would be buried along the Allied German border to guard against Russian invasion. See, what we have to remember is that after the Second World War, Germany was carved into three pieces. There were two large chunks, and you had Berlin that was on its own. So Berlin was actually cut in half as well, hence the Berlin Wall. And well, you see, Russia kind of stopped being friends with the Allies after the war. Something to do with communism. Anyways, I digress. See, these devices, they had a few different methods of detonation. They could be detonated via a wired remote from just under 5 kilometers away. They could be detonated by a timer, and lastly by an inbuilt anti-tampering device or pressure switch. However, they encountered a problem. That being the cold, it turns out that nuclear landmines just don't like it. Well, they tried several methods of trying to safeguard the devices against the cold, the usual things like blankets and hot water bottles and cuddles and such. But nothing worked quite as well as chickens. Yeah, they installed chickens with food and water into these devices to keep them warm. Seems the body warmth of the chicken was just what the nuclear warhead needed. Chicken-powered nukes. Who would have thunk it? Now, staying with the British, but moving a little further back in time to World War II, we come to something that was deployed only once. Exploding rats. Developed by the Special Operations Executive, Sir Winston Churchill's famous Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, the idea was fairly simple in design. They took a number of rats under the premise of medical research. After killing them, according to documentation, they sewed plastic explosives inside of them. Although I have to admit the images do make it seem like the explosives got inside the rats via another method. I'll let you be the judge. Anyways, the idea was for the rats to be distributed around boiler rooms and furnaces, the theory being that the boiler operator or locomotive stoker would shovel the dead rat into the furnace for disposal, and, well, it would explode. The downside was that in its only ever deployment the Germans intercepted the shipment, so we never actually saw these guys in action. That said, the Germans dedicated so many resources to finding more of these devices that it enabled further operations to push forward unhindered, and it was therefore still considered a success. Now, boys and girls, we move to some of my favourites. Let's face it, the Americans are amazing at not only coming up with crazy ideas, actually putting them into action and usually making them work. You gotta love America, haven't you? Right, now the first one of these, Project Pigeon. The first of the animal-guided bombs we're going to cover today. And to be fair, this was pretty ingenious. So much so that it was actually first developed during World War II, cancelled but then resurrected by the US Navy post-war, before being cancelled again when electronic munition guidance was actually developed. So, what was Project Pigeon, I hear you ask? Well, luckily I'm going to tell you. Well, the idea was that specially trained pigeons would be strapped inside of a specially designed bomb with flight controls attached to a gyro at the front. Inside of the bomb, an image of the target would be projected onto a screen in front of the pigeon. It was trained to peck at the target, keeping it in the center, which in turn gave input to the controls guiding the bomb to its target. It was easy to see these things as normal bombs, but they were actually gliders with an explosive midsection and a control section in the nose cone, making the pigeons essentially kamikaze pilots. Yeah. Now, staying with animal guided munitions, we have the next American Hatch plan. Unlike its pigeon guided counterpart, this one was specifically designed for anti ship munitions. It was actually the one that I found when I Googled things about flying cats and tried to disprove it. During World War II, the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA, developed a munition for the US Air Force designed to make anti ship operations a little more effective with precision guidance. Their method of doing this? Well, have the bomb guided by a cat. Because, well, cats don't like water, do they? Yeah, that was actually their method of thinking. The idea was simple. Train the cat to be able to guide the bomb, strap them to it, and drop it over the ocean to attack ships. The idea being that the cat's own hatred of water would mean that it would automatically steer the bomb to the nearest dry ground, the enemy ship. Sounds great on paper. The only problem was that when they dropped these bombs in testing, they found that cats pass out when experiencing the G-forces of being dropped from a plane. None of the cat bombs dropped in testing were ever recovered. Hardly any surprise, really. I mean, cats aren't exactly known for their swimming abilities, are they? Staying with the Americans and cats for a moment, and making a momentary time jump back to the Cold War and the 1960s, we find Project Acoustic Kitty. And no, I'm not joking, that is actually what it was called. Project Acoustic Kitty was literally the CIA failing to learn the lessons of their World War II predecessors and thinking that they could actually train a cat to do what they want. Now I'm going to hit pause here because I really don't understand how these people, those that are meant to be intelligent people in charge of protecting the Western world from terrorists and dictators and idiots with big ass bombs that want to kill us because we don't subscribe to their religious ideals or to communism, that idiotic ideal that always leads to crimes against humanity and genocide. How do these people fail to understand what the rest of us have known for generations upon generations? That simple fact that you can't get a cat to do anything it doesn't want to do. They will literally do the exact opposite of what you want just to prove a point. I mean, cats were once worshipped as gods by the Egyptians, and trust me, they've never forgotten that. I literally had a cat take a shit in my boot once, just because I stopped giving him treats. The fact that he ate all of the treats that we had apparently wasn't a good enough reason, and apparently I should have gone out and bought more from a shop that was closed at the time. Cats are dictators, it's that simple. You ain't gonna train them to do anything, it's as simple as that. Anyway, to the story. Project Acoustic Kitty. The idea was simple in its form. Take a cat, train it to be a spy, and kit it out with listening devices. The plan was to have these cats move into the vicinity of Russian diplomats and operatives so that they could listen into secret conversations and therefore aid the development of human intelligence, spycraft at its finest basic form. This meant two things. One, train the cats to comply with instructions. Good luck with that. Second was to kit the cat out with listening devices to perform the task. This meant surgery. The cat in question went into surgery and had a microphone implanted in one of its ears, a transmitter implanted at the base of its skull, and an antenna that was implanted just under its fur line. The one and only Acoustic Kitty ever produced was then sent on its first mission in Washington, D.C., where it was tasked with listening into the conversation of two Soviet operatives in a park outside the Russian embassy. Acoustic Kitty didn't make it to the park. In fact, Acoustic Kitty was driven by a taxi as it crossed the road to the park. Apparently, despite spending $20 million training Acoustic Kitty, they failed to teach it to look both ways when crossing the road. Or they tried and it didn't listen. Either one is actually possible. Either way, after that little escapade, they officially scrapped the whole idea, citing in a memo that they found that cats can't be trained. I mean, it's not like anyone that has ever lived in a house with a cat could have told them that. Or even their World War II counterparts who tried to train cats to guide bombs. Moving swiftly through time and back to World War II. Lastly, but certainly not least, my personal favourite of this little bit of research, bat bombs, otherwise known as Project X-Ray. The idea behind this was simply brilliant. A specially designed bomb with 1,000 individual compartments containing a Mexican three-tailed bat with a kerosene incendiary device attached to it would be dropped over Japanese cities and installations. The idea was that the bomb would be dropped at dawn, a parachute would deploy, which in turn would open the compartments, releasing the bats. It would automatically seek shelter as the sun was rising, meaning that the bats would roost in the attics and eaves of the buildings, which in Japan were largely made of wood and paper materials. Later, the incendiary devices, which were on a timer, would detonate, causing fires in hard to reach places in these highly flammable buildings. Sounds great, doesn't it? Ingenious almost. A game changer, in fact. Yet, it was never deployed in combat. Why? Well, the reason is why this is my favourite. See, in testing, the Bat bomb was deployed over Carlsbad Army Airfield. The Bats were carrying kerosene incendiary devices, but the test was to determine that they would roost in the way theorised, which they did. The problem was that they forgot to disarm the incendiary devices. And, well, let's just say that the Bats were very effective, and Carlsbad Army Airfield was no more. Mm. Said the project wasn't fully cancelled at that point. Further tests conducted by the US Navy, because the US Army weren't allowed to play with them anymore, showed that they were actually 10 times more effective than a conventional bomb. But development time meant that the atomic bomb became ready first, so they were used and the bat bombs were never deployed in combat. Personally, I just love that the US Army burned down one of their own bases testing these things. And there we have it, boys and girls. Some of the weirdest weapons I've ever heard of. I literally looked into this after my son said something about flying cats, and I Googled things to prove him wrong and found cat guided bombs and figured it was lies. And, well, it really wasn't. I swear this world just gets bloody weirder. Like, I'm going for a pint of rum and a lay down. Remember, if you like what we're doing here, hit subscribe, hit like, hit the bell button so you get notifications that we're here. Yeah, drop us a comment, read them. Even if you think we're idiots, tell us. We don't care. Anyway, rum is calling. Till next time, kids.